All right, hi everybody. Welcome to the second in our series of data webinars. For social housing management at IPS or at Bynaric. We create IPS. It's a all-around platform for social housing management and all of the information and data that goes along with that. Part of our goal with these webinars is to help everybody to understand what the possibilities are around data management, how improving your data management can improve your delivery of housing to the people who need it. So our goal is to help you to help more people. Today we are focusing on data security. So we have Philip Brining joining us today to talk a little bit about that. Throughout the whole event, we will have the Q&A open, so you're welcome to drop questions into there, and I will ask them of Philip as we go. So don't be shy. If you have any questions and you would like to have them answered, then just throw it in the chat, and I will ask it. So since I know it's lunchtime, it's Friday, everybody wants to get moving on with everything. I will bring Philip up and let him introduce himself, since I always think people introduce themselves better than I introduce them. I tend to ramble on and say everything I can think of, and most of it is probably not relevant to the person whatsoever. So I will bring Philip up and have you introduce yourself.
Thank you, Caitlin. I'm not sure I'm actually very good at introducing myself, but I'm Phil Brining, and I'm delighted to join you today. So thank you very much for inviting me along. And I work for a firm called Data Protection People. We're a specialist data protection and information security company over in England, in Leeds. We do work all over Europe with some of our clients, but most of our work, to be fair, is actually UK centric. And we do a range of obvious stuff, audits and data protection officer gigs and training and a whole range of different services. And we also work in the payment card industry, data security standard as well, assessing. So I've been doing this type of work for 15 years. Love it, you know, can't think of doing anything else at the moment, but that's really all I have to say, Caitlin, about myself. You can add to it if I've missed anything important off.
There we go. So will you tell us a little bit also about your work with data security people and how you guys work with social housing in particular about data security?
Yes, that's one of the important factors I forgot to add. So the majority of our customers are actually social housing providers. Again, mostly in the UK. So we've probably worked with 250 out of 1,400. Most of the housing associations we work with are fairly large. Although I have worked with some really small ones of 7 or 8 employees. But some of the big ones we've got 60,000 properties, and they're truly working all over the country. Because we've been working with predominantly social housing companies for 5 years, and to be honest, we understand an awful lot about the challenges that they've got and the ways that they work. And I didn't really have any awareness of social housing 6 years ago before I started working with them. And we've got people on the staff here that have worked in their career in social housing providers, and have joined us as consultants. So I think we've probably got a reasonable understanding, but I've not been on the inside of worked as an executive or an officer of a social housing company. So all my knowledge is working in our advisory capacity and helping them with the challenges. But again, because we work with a lot, we see the same types of issues coming up and the same problems. We've also worked with some of the software suppliers to the housing market, which was interesting in the run up to the GDPR. A lot of our work with them was helping them assess their products. And I took the view that, and I said to them, the ones we worked with, your product will either actively help somebody to comply with this new GDPR thing, or it'll actively hinder them. So if you haven't got good access control management, you haven't got good retention management, you haven't got good metadata around your records, you're going to really actively stop someone from properly, truly embracing and delivering and implementing the spirit of the GDPR, this kind of concept of privacy by design and by default. And they often shrugged their shoulders and said, oh, well, you know, wish we'd never asked you in, but but you know, I've seen some horror stories of software that just does a really poor job at it and just makes the organization's job an awful lot harder than it should be. Anyway, sorry. So yeah, we've got some experience of working with social housing and have some understanding of the challenges that they have.
Wow. Kind of along those lines then, in your experience, why is it so important to have data security? Like, what's the whole point of this data security, what have you? Yeah, it's a good question, and one which I have mulled over, you know, quite a lot of time mulling over. But I mean, to me, it has to come down to, you know, there's a lot of different factors at play here, and trust is one of them. So, you know, people have got to trust that you're going to have their best intentions at heart when you're handling their data, and that is about, you know, security. What is security? Is, you know, in the GDPR, it's about confidentiality, integrity, availability, and resilience. You know, and what does that mean? Well, of data and of systems. So confidentiality, you know, making sure that people have only got access to information, and I don't mean records, I mean fields within records in a database system, you know, where they require it. And if they don't require it, then why provide that kind of access? So what we, you know, again, in a systems level, we're looking at field level security, and you know, you'll be the same in the organizations you work with and that are on here, but we have some housing clients that they have resident employees and resident board members, and some of those people, we've handled cases where, you know, our support desk, where those resident employees or tenant employees have said, you know, I'm not happy about all my colleagues seeing all my record, particularly if I've got financial difficulties or, you know, medical conditions. But, you know, and then the housing associations often say, well, we can't control access to that level on our system. And I was, well, you change your system. You know, you've got an obligation, you know, to these individuals. They've got rights, and, you know, you should be adopting, you know, that high level, that high bar of confidentiality, integrity, availability, and resilience. And if you can't control access to records and information within records, to me, that's a problem. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of this is about trust. It's also about confidence and consistency in an organization. So you don't want people having to make things up as they go along. You really want a set of operating procedures and you know, really well established, mature, you know, well set out, that people understand. That's what the training should focus on. You know, the way we do this around here is like this, because if people are left to interpret it or make it up as they go along, then you've lost control. And in terms of information security, that's not a good thing. You know, people who shouldn't do but can access emails on their mobiles, people who shouldn't do but can, you know, use their own devices to access data. So I think having a consistent approach is also, you know, one of those important things in terms of security. And this is an interesting one, because if you do this properly, there is a cost to it, but the cost of getting it wrong is higher than the cost of getting it right. You're then finding that boards are weighing, what's the likelihood of getting it wrong? You know, what's the likelihood of things going wrong, or the likelihood? But, you know, it's an unquantifiable one. But my view is, if you get this right, security well designed and well implemented, then it's a lower cost of operation. And then the final point really is compliance. You know, the law demands, you know, and is moving in particular direction, isn't it? You know, law's getting tighter. There's new regulations in England coming in, the UK coming into effect around managing financial records. So everything's moving around the world in one direction, and having more security that works, it means that you're more likely to comply with the law. So to me, it's trust, confidence, cost, compliance, and consistency. You know, and that to me is, you know, why it's important to get this stuff right. There's probably other reasons as well, to be fair. We could probably talk about this all afternoon. You know what I'm like, I can rabbit on all day, can't I? You can keep up. Well, kind of along those lines too. Is there, you had mentioned about like some tenant employees not wanting their data seen. Is there a kind of push from the tenant side, even not the employee ones, about knowing their data is secure?
And what's interesting to me is that, for instance, the privacy notice doesn't have to have any information about security in it, does it? That's not one of the requirements. Well, why not? But a record of processing activity does, but it doesn't have to have lawful grounds. So kind of in the GDPR, there's a bit of a mix-up about, if it's that important, why aren't you telling people about it? And people often do put security paragraphs in their privacy notice, and most of it is absolute nonsense, isn't it? It's superficial, and actually, if you dug deep, they probably don't do it. We're not finding, to be fair, a push from tenants to ask about security. They're not pushing, saying, "No, I want guarantees about this." What we're finding is some level of subject access requests coming in from a variety of tenants and in many cases employees and former employees. And again, that gives you an issue if you can't actually extract the data. We have a subject access request bureau that handles sifting through data. We've got 18 SARs on at the moment we're handling for clients, and one of them sent us 328 gigabits of data. 328 gigabits of data. Well, you've got to have better systems for extracting relevant data. Don't give us everything, because it's going to cost you a fortune for us to go through. Imagine how many pages of A4 that is. And what we're looking for is personal data that the requester is entitled to. So, we're not really finding people saying, I want and I demand more security. I think there's a difference in the supply chain, and I've always maintained that I think the supply chain is probably going to be more effective at driving change than the regulators. So, if you're bidding for a government contract and you're being asked security questions, you've got to demonstrate compliance or certifications or whatever. That seems to be more of an incentive than getting it right because the law requires you to. It's always coming down to commerciality, isn't it? If you want to win bids, and actually the best way to win a bid is to be able to demonstrate compliance, that is going to drive behaviour.
There we go. Along those same lines, I was just, as you were talking, as with any of these webinars, I always add in shameless plugs for IPS. It sounds like having well-structured data is very helpful in maintaining security as well, and within that.
I think it does, but the well-structured data is part of the problem you can get right more easily. Structured data is great, providing, again, there's good metadata around it. So if one of the, I'm not, you're going to think I'm plugging Salesforce here. We're a Salesforce user, and in the past I was a Salesforce developer. And about a year and a half ago, they introduced new metadata. When you create a field in Salesforce, it's now asking you, is this field relevant for GDPR, the Californian CCPA, or what? Now that's good metadata. That isn't. My view is all database systems should have that, because as a database operator, I want to know which fields are relevant for what. Which fields are likely to contain special category data, which fields like to contain personal data, which fields like to contain commercially sensitive data. Now, if you could get structured data with that kind of metadata around it, I think you're in a better position. But the big problem that everyone's got in handling these subject access requests is emails. You're getting unstructured data in email systems, and you've got this culture of copying in people and not changing the subject line on emails when you change topic, and what that creates is a mass of information that's duplicated and replicated, and relevant and not relevant, like an email that says see you at 10, and then another email that's saying we need to get rid of this employee, all mixed up in the same mess of data, and we need to get tools that are better at helping us manage that. In my view, email is one of my bugbears. I hate email. It's just such an unstructured environment to work in. I can never find anything in it. You need to move relevant stuff out into a proper database management system, which has got much more structure to it, and probably better retention management around it.
There we go. Yeah, no, that's really sort of the cascade of data that we get, of information, if we don't want to call it data because that's too scary, around communications or anything within it. I do know, again, shameless plug, that we can build, we have the ability to have all of the metadata in the IPS system. So kind of along those lines as well, this idea of metadata and the unseen information that we need to have. What are some of the things that either organizations just don't know about data security that's hampering them, or kind of what are the big barriers that you see organizations running into in terms of data security or understanding the need for it?
Yeah, good question. Hard to answer. So there's potentially, you know, a siloification, if that's such a word, exists, you know, in organizations, and IT or security. You know, there's information security, which covers paper as well as IT, and then you've got cybersecurity, which is all kind of IT, and often different people responsible for those elements. There's no kind of coordinated strategy. And if the IT guys, you know, are there looking after the cybersecurity, and they're, you know, highly skilled, then that's fine. But in other organizations where you haven't necessarily got, you know, a internal IT team, then, you know, what you haven't got people that are thinking security objectives, you know, risk analysis, where are attack vectors, where are vulnerabilities, and therefore you're down to, well, what resources and time have we got? So resources and time, I think, is one of the key barriers, and a lack of understanding. If you're pitching, you know, they say, right, I want to have an intrusion detection system. I haven't got the capability of scoping out an intrusion detection system, so I'm going to get sold something which may not even fit my purpose. I probably haven't got the capability of defining what my objective is from that kind of thing. So there's a lot of stuff out there to help combat it, but I'm not sure how much people understand it. And it's you're hitting a moving target as well. Like the whole kind of attack environment is shifting day on day. You know, we've seen an upsurge in ransomware, and there's been, you know, changes in the patterns of attack. And you know, your biggest threat is your insiders, isn't it, your users. So whenever I'm thinking of security, particularly cybersecurity, I'm thinking of at least, you know, 5 levels. The user being, you know, the top level and the biggest problem, and then you got the device below that. You know, what are they using to process data? How are they accessing it? How's that device secured? Is it pin protected? Is it encrypted? What if it gets lost? You know, is it their device? Is it our device? And then above that, you've got the network. You know, how are we moving data about, and is it protected in the way it's moving about? You know, I've got a new car this week. I plugged my phone in, and it says, "Can I download your contacts?" Well, I don't know. You know, I'm put on the spot now. I've got to think about, do I want, what's going to happen? Are they going to sit in the car? Are they going to sit in the cloud? You know, where is that data going? So that's kind of also above the network level. There's an application level. So how secure are the systems we're using? I talked to you before this call here that we found some security, you know, threats really, or compliance threats in our use of Teams this week, and we were horrified actually they existed, and we're now changing our platform for doing our WebExes because of the way we're using Teams, and that's the application level. And beyond that, you've got servers. You know, well, where actually is the data? You know, going back to my car analogy, is it sat on a Ford server? Is it sat on a memory chip in the car? What happens when I sell the car? And what happens if it was a hire car? You know, and I've downloaded my car. So, yeah, I think the security is a big thing, and I think it's really complicated, and particularly when you've got those different tiers, because you need different techniques and different protections to protect devices as opposed to networks, as opposed to apps, as opposed to users. So, you know, I think it's a well misunderstood area, and I think it's very confusing, to be honest, as well. And because I do PCI DSS assessments, I tend to think of that kind of structure, user, device, network, app, servers, because that's how PCI works, trained me to think. You know, you got that structure to the PCI stuff. But if you haven't got that experience, then, you know, what is your framework for determining what security is? You know, what are you trying to stop happening? You know, what behaviors are you trying to, you know, encourage, and what behaviors are you trying to stop, and what tools have you got to do those things? And I think, as I say, I think it's a quite tricky area. So the lack of knowledge, resource, and time, and then you're down to money, aren't you? So, you know, if you want proper protections, well, you know, how much are you prepared to spend, because you could spend an awful lot of money, couldn't you? And is it all necessary? And you got convince someone to spend the money on it. It's a really big question, and one that I probably haven't answered very well. But it's a tricky thing, really. I think, you know.
Hold on, switch my. There we go. Well, I would say here in Ireland, given that our National Health Service just got hacked into, I think everybody in Ireland can at least support the idea that we should improve data security. But you mentioned PCSI. For anybody who maybe doesn't know what that structure is, can you fill us in?
Yeah, it's too jargonistic, aren't I? It's the payment card industry data security standard. So this, anybody that takes payments using payment cards, credit cards, has to comply with the PCI DSS, the payment card industry data security standard. It's a global phenomena, and the main card brands, which is the JCB Japanese credit bank, is it? Visa, MasterCard, Amex, American Express. Many years ago, I'd have thought 2006, 5, 4 maybe, developed a data security standard, and all merchants who are taking payments, you know, whether you're a housing association taking payments for rent, or you're a local authority taking payments for gym memberships, or you're a shop, physical or online, you know, then you've got to comply with this standard, and it's the banks that force you to comply. And if you're doing sufficient level of transactions, like over 1 million transactions a year, you have to have an external company, qualified company, come on site and audit you. So I've been auditing one of the UK's big retailers. It's got 470 stores, so I was auditing a sample of stores over the last fortnight. And then they've also got a website, so we were auditing the e-commerce platform. They also have a mail order service who are auditing their telephone systems, you know, to ensure that the cardholder data is processed in a secure way in line with the standard. It's a good standard because it's been around for a long time, but it only focuses on a proportion of data, cardholder data, you know. So I've said since I've been working with the standard since 2008, you take the same principles and apply them to other sorts of data, like personal data, you know, or commercial data or whatever else. But again, often people don't, they see it siloed. Anyway, that's what it is. The PCI DSS is the payment card industry data security standard. But I was interested to see, Caitlin, changing something slightly, that the Data Protection Commission in Ireland has published a draft regulatory strategy yesterday. So they've set out their next 5-year plan about how they're going to help regulate, you know, the data protection arrangements over in Ireland, which would be interesting to see. I haven't not managed to download and read it, but that'll be interesting to see how, you know, what stance they're taking, because over in Ireland, obviously you've got the privacy directive breathing down your neck, which is going to change the way that you're doing a range of different things, Internet of Things, you know, electronic marketing and so on and so forth. So what I like about working in this sector is it's been constantly moving for a number of years now, which is great from my perspective, but I think probably frustrating from everybody else's perspective.
There we go. Yeah, well, as somebody who works in digital marketing, the always changing data protection rules are a constant battle. It's just an ever-changing obstacle course.
Yeah, it's not as much the rules have changed significantly, but it's the interpretation of the rules that is the big problem, isn't it? So everyone knows when the rules have changed, but it's less easy to find when the guidance changes and the court, you know, the way the court's rulings and judgments go. That's what changes the subtle changes, and they're hard to keep track of.
Mm-hmm. There we go. Keep forgetting to turn my screen on when I start talking. Definitely. And I think that idea of having something that then can adapt quickly to the things that change, because I know, I mean, from the marketing side of data, nobody wants to build a sort of rigid structure because it could change, or the interpretations could change, or the likelihood that you're going to get prosecuted for misusing something could change any minute. So kind of within.
It's tricky. And again, in the housing sector, the challenges or the questions we get asked are things like, our newsletter. We have an obligation in the housing regulator in the UK to provide information about our performance. We do that electronically via our newsletter. Is that electronic marketing? Does that get caught by the PECA or the e-privacy rules? Well, it depends what it says. Just because you've got a legal obligation to do it doesn't mean to say that trumps the e-privacy laws. You have to do that in a way that complies with the e-privacy laws. But if it is genuinely informational and not marketing, and not trying to sell anything, then they're not caught by the PECA. The PECA only regulates unsolicited direct marketing by email or some sort of messaging. But as soon as you start putting adverts in there, even if it's for get computer courses, get back to work, all that theoretically is unsolicited direct marketing by email. So you have to have some quite good controls over what you're signing off as being in those kind of outbound newsletters. But that's one of the ones we often get asked by our housing clients, and we tell them no, they're not covered by the PECA, but you need to do some thorough testing of what the content is. You need to check whether or not it could be construed as being marketing or not. But yeah, that's always an interesting question. One of the other big questions we get asked is about processes and data sharing. So one of my colleagues has just said to me, I got a housing client, for instance, and they've ordered a fridge to get delivered to a tenant, and the fridge is coming from Currys PC World. Is Currys PC World a data processor? No, they're not. Why would there be a data processor? Oh, well, they're a supplier and we've given them a name and address. That doesn't make them a processor. But again, there's a lot of seems to me to be a lot of confusion about what is a processor when we are knowingly passing personal data to them. A locksmith, a repairs contractor, a plumber, doesn't make them a processor. But again, what we're writing in the UK, we're writing a code of conduct. GDPR allows for codes of conduct for sectors. So we're developing a code of conduct for housing with the National Federation of Housing and a few housing associations. And they've said to us, these are the 13 areas that are problematic for us. What we'd like is consistency, and we'd like legal certainty. So we're in the middle of writing a code of conduct that says, if we do this and this, it all has to get signed off by the Information Commissioner's Office. Is that going to be okay? If the ICO comes back and says, yeah, that's okay, everyone knows where they stand. If the ICO comes back and says, no, you need to change this, then again, we've got a framework that people will stick to. And I don't know if that's something that should happen in Ireland, but a code of conduct is a good way of developing out methodologies and work practices that are signed off by the regulator that then gives you that, hopefully, that legal certainty, at least for a period of time until they change the rules, of course.
As I was speaking with a lot of housing organizations recently about various kinds of tenant engagement, especially how to do that digitally with COVID or going into the future, going in post-COVID. So it'll be, I think, probably another whole genre of security and information to manage within there. When we do have, or when people are starting to have a lot more of that kind of unstructured conversation or unstructured contact, and the data that comes out of that within, say, their tenant engagement portal or whatever sort of platform that they're controlling.
Yeah, when, of course, a year ago, everyone was clamoring to kind of mobilize their employees and their workforce, and that means you had a lot of people working from home. And we got asked a lot of questions about that in relation to security, and the obvious stuff like, where do they live? Is it a shared house? Have they got Alexa constantly listening to what's going on? Obvious, well, you would think obvious stuff. Then they've got a laptop. How are they connecting to you? Is it via a VPN tunnel, or is it not via a VPN tunnel? How are you collaborating and sharing data as a team of people? And even more worrying, and you've got potentially people processing payments using payment card information at home. We had one client, somebody sat in the garden processing credit card payments, and the laptop, they popped in to get a cup of tea, and the laptop got stolen because she left it in the garden. I mean, why would you change your work practice? Whatever is good to work for in the office, clear desk, clear screen. Do people do it at home? don't know what was the guidance was issued out, but
Mm-hmm.
you're right, we're gonna have different issues. People are gonna be coming back into work. Maybe they've changed their work practice and their behaviours. You've got new ways to engage with tenants, and it all has to be, you know, thought through, well planned, well designed, well implemented, and monitored. You know, I don't think there's enough monitoring and testing and compliance checking, and I think that's everyone's responsibility. It's not just the compliance, you know, the governance team or the IT team. Everyone should be, you know, thinking about, you know, having a zero tolerance culture. As a kind of aside, I did a lot of data protection auditing, and one time I was auditing down in Ipswich, and I always like to get on site early to see if I can get in. I usually can get in the building, blag my way in, and sit in reception waiting for my host to join. So I got into this housing association down in Ipswich, and there was about 20 white sacks of confidential waste all sat on the floor, and I would have thought two-thirds were open. So I sat there, and people coming in and signing in for work and offering me cups of tea, and didn't have a clue who I was. And then went on the building tour about 3 in the afternoon, and the sacks were still there. And I said to the head of IT, who was my host, well, you know, whose responsibility to make sure these sacks are closed, you know, sealed shut? He said, oh, it's my job, you know, but I've been with you all day. And it's not his job, it's everyone's job. Everyone should have a real issue about this confidential waste being, you know, unsecured and being sat there all day. But, you know, no, it's not our job, it's Jamie's job. That's the wrong culture, isn't it? It's everyone's job.
There it goes. You and I were chatting before we started too about this idea of kind of how to educate people on anything really, or training. Is that one of the aspects of this sort of creating the zero tolerance culture and making sure that people understand that not only that they are responsible for it, but that they can take steps to help, you know, to help security?
Yeah, and one of the weaknesses, I think, of training, so there's an over-reliance, in my view, on e-learning. And the e-learning courses in data protection and cybersecurity are all about, in data protection, it's all about the law. You know, the law says this, you know, there are X principles, you know, you've got 30 days or whatever is a month to do your SARS. That's not relevant to most employees. They need to know what that means in this establishment. So they need to know, if I need to recognize a SAR, I need to know they exist, a subject access request. And if I get one, I need to know what I've got to do. And if I'm on the front line, you know, a housing officer, and I have a verbal request, I need to know what to do with it. It doesn't matter the detail, because I'm not involved in the detail. All I need to know is call to action. You know, my laptop goes blue screening, asks the person data breach potential securities. I need to report it. You don't need to know such a lot of detail, and I think that's a major weakness. Rather than focusing on, you know, how the law is applied here, how we manage compliance here, there's too much ticky box exercise in my view of, you know, well, they've run through the data protection training course with whichever e-learning platform, and it's too superficial, it's too high level, doesn't apply to their job. So I think, you know, education and training is critical, and awareness raising is not a one-off exercise once a year. This is every week or every month. Again, when I've been a DPO inside organizations, and I've produced posters, you know, to stick up on the notice boards every month. And on International Data Protection Day, one year, I got a load of balloons printed up and put them around everyone's computer screens. You know, anything just to, you know, have a talking point to raise awareness. And there's some good days in the calendar: International Data Protection Day, International Cybersecurity Day, you know, Data Retention Day. So there's tons of opportunities to put together an awareness raising campaign, but I don't see enough of that around. I mean, I know it's all time and resource intensive, and most people haven't got the time to think through the concepts, you know, design up something, execute it and deploy it out there. But yeah, we need more of that, because culture is behavior. Behavior is influenceable by training and education. You know, we need to. It's a bit like health and safety, data protection, isn't it? So, you know, it'll take decades to change the social culture. To stop people clicking through privacy notices without reading them. It'll take decades, I think.
Kind of along those lines then, what if, and this might be revealing trade secrets, but what would be sort of, if your basic first steps, my organization has zero data security that I know of, what would you say these are the kind of the the really simple ways that an organization can start that journey towards creating security.
Oh dear, maybe. Right. Well, I guess, you know, the old saying, how to eat an elephant in small pieces. It really, I suppose somebody needs to assess, you know, where the big risks are. I mean, you've got to fight, my view, fight on multiple levels. So if you can set out your framework of rules for your users, and train them what they can and can't do, or educate them as to what they can and can't do, that's a fairly easy win. But you then, you know, looking at, well, if we've got lots of mobile devices, you know, then they're vulnerable unless we can secure them. So they need encrypting, need properly protecting, and so you got to, I think, put something on every level. But then you think about the network. You know, how are people connecting to our systems? You know, should we be, if they're remote working, should we be getting them through a remote, you know, a VPN or some sort of remote access? It depends how you got your IT set up. You might have it all virtualized. You might have Citrix. You know, it depends really what you've got. So I think the first step is to understand your landscape, isn't it, and work out where your threats are. I think the biggest threat is always going to be your users and probably your devices. But then you may be into the application level, thinking, well, you know, what data are we collecting? Where's it going? How are we using it? Who's got access to it? How do we control access to it? Does our app allow us to have that level of control that we really want? And then from a GDPR perspective, EU GDPR perspective, you know, where is the data physically located? You know, we're going to have to contend with all the changes to the internationalization rules that are coming down the tracks. You know, the standard contractual clauses and the European essential guarantees, which, you know, they are going to be with us in a few months' time, and we're going to probably have to repaper all of our contracts where we're internationalizing data. So I think as a starting point, you know, I think understanding your landscape, what data you've got, what systems have you got, what processing activities have you got, you know, you've got to deal with the users. And I think the devices accessing the system, if you've got tons of mobile devices out there, you know, it's a different situation to if you've got, you know, already got a Citrix setup that's inherently a bit more secure, because you haven't got, you know, you got less things to worry about probably, but different things to worry about probably. But you can take it such a long way, can't you? So, you know, are you then putting intrusion detection systems on your network again, I think putting logging on your network, so log in events on the network. But if you've got no resources to check the logs, what's the point in logging? You can then see when you got attacked. But ideally, you got a logging activity, and you got people checking the logs every morning. Again, that's a PCI discipline. You know, PCI DSS says you got to log events on your network in your cardholder data environment, and you got to have somebody. You got to have evidence of somebody checking the logs. Again, we need evidence that these things are in place. I don't think I've answered your question at all well, but I think starting from scratch, you know, there's a lot to do if you really are starting from scratch on security. Another interesting approach would be to say, well, you know, we'll start off using a pre-existing framework. So maybe, you know, Cyber Essentials or Cyber Essentials Plus, you know, it will set out, you know, 10 controls. It's a good way of saying, well, that we'll take these 4, for instance, to start with, and we'll try and get those developed out, and then we'll maybe do a few more later. So you don't have to create the wheel, is I guess what I'm saying there. You can pick up some good frameworks that are pre-existing, and then, you know, as a strategy to achieving security, start to adopt those. But this is a continual improvement process. You know, it's an incremental journey. You're only as good as your last day we didn't get attacked. Really.
I guess imagine one of those signs in factories, you know, X number of days since an accident.
Exactly. Yeah. Why don't we have those? When last time I was on site, customers doing some data protection work, they had a big whiteboard full of all sorts of departmental stuff, and I wrote on their whiteboard, you know, data protection department, and I put on, you know, number of days since last incident, number of secure SARS received this week, number of hours training, KPIs. Why aren't they there? I did a lot of work for a major food manufacturing company. They make baby milk all over the world, massive company. Make baby milk and other things, but I was working for their baby milk division, and they had informational boards all over their factories and all over their offices, you know, key performance indicators about their business. Nothing about information security, nothing about data protection. Why not? Why not? It's a cultural thing, isn't it? If you put a board up there, people might start measuring things and putting on as KPIs. If there's no board up there, it's not highlighting any attention to it.
Yeah. There it goes. So I think maybe the first basic step then is to get a data security board and put some numbers on there, and you can just start maybe kind of summing everything up you said there, kind of making it important from an organizational level. So from a sort of top down, saying, you know, this is something that we are now going to put value on, and so you know, everybody else in the organization then can kind of follow suit.
I think that's another great point. You're doing the job you've brought me on to do, so I apologise for that. But yeah, ownership at the top. You know, who is owning this concept of information security, and where's it getting driven from, and who's setting the agenda? Because if senior management aren't embracing it and are railing against it, pushing back on cost, and there's something that's not quite right. You know, again, in my view. So in our kind of model templated data protection compliance management framework that we've developed out, we've got a one-page A4 privacy policy, you know, data protection compliance management policy, one side, and the chief exec is meant to sign it, you know, and it's really high level stuff. And we do the same for information security, but if it's not seen to be supported from the top, if it's middle management driving the agenda, it's got less chance of sticking, you know, more chance of becoming unstuck. So ownership, and what forum have you got? You know, again, in the data protection world, we suggested like working party to help with this work towards GDPR compliance. So some of those groups still meet on a monthly basis, and they're measuring and monitoring and doing the DPO function, you know, assessing. So the same type of thing for information security. Get people from different departments. If you think you need to improve, get people from different departments who either in touch with what's going on in the business, or vocal, or have got clout, and get them into a working party to try and, you know, help to move the agenda forward. But again, that needs to be supported from the top, because if it's all middle management pushing it, then it's so easy to say, I'm not attending that meeting because I've got this to do, you know, and that again, that doesn't really work, does it? So you got to get ownership of this stuff, you know, at a proper level.
I think, and kind of along those same lines, that idea of getting again, shameless plug of IPS, but I love telling people about it. It's part of why we have these webinars. But that idea of getting all of the departments to talk to each other is really kind of the guiding principle behind IPS, that we've put everything onto one platform, truly onto one platform, as opposed to connecting together lots of softwares from different departments that may or may not be able to talk to each other.
Yeah, I mean, there's another good point, Kelly. So integrations are great, aren't they? Until they don't work right. So again, as a Salesforce developer, I'm used to kind of APIs and, you know, using third-party platforms often to move data about. Well, where is the data going? You know, and how are they working? And they're not foolproof, are they? And they're not necessarily absolutely robust. So getting information, as much as you can, into one application, if it's functionally doing the job, the more you've got, the more weaknesses you've got, the more points of failure you've got. So if you can eliminate integrations and APIs, and, you know, and APIs are fine, but if you've got other ways of moving data about, you know, import routines from CSV files, I mean, that is worrying, isn't it? Particularly what happens sometimes is if the database you're importing data into has got validation rules on the fields. You know, this field can only be 10 characters long, for instance. The CSV file, it being a CSV, people have added on an extra column, for instance. Your integration might break, so you might find you're not importing all the records, or you might be exporting the records into CSV files for another system to pick up and import. I mean, it's just a cronky system, isn't it? We should be further on than that. So if you've got lots of stuff in the one platform, it's a much better place to be.
Well, you're doing my job then now. how great of a solution that IPS is. But yeah, that's the whole idea, to not have to integrate, because everything is truly in one place. I'm just keeping an eye on the time here, but I know you kind of talked briefly about some of the benefits of improved data security and that sort of cost benefit analysis that anybody needs to run around the possibility of something breaking versus putting in the insurance in case it does. What could you say were some of the sort of tangible benefits that a social housing provider could see in terms of improving their data security? Another hard question I've given you.
Yes, it is one, because most of the benefits are intangible. So every day you go without a problem, that's your investment returning on the investment, isn't it? But that's intangible. But the tangible things, the chances are that things will be more efficient. Again, that's a hard one to measure, isn't it? But it's really the absence of issues that is your true measure, I think. Or again, I remember talking to some housing providers. I was quite staggered to read some stuff on education, and saying that the average primary school gets one cyber attack a week, which is far less than the average business gets. So, I remember talking with a guy called Adrian Lung from Catalyst Housing. We were doing something a couple of years ago, and he said that they had 500 attacks a week at Catalyst. Most of them phishing attacks. And he said, some of them get like 3 or 4 get through our filtering system, but the majority get caught. Again, that's an investment working, but it's an intangible, isn't it? Nobody knows unless you go and check your spam box, and you go and check all the the statistics, the KPIs behind these platforms. You don't know how effective it is, and that's part of the problem, isn't it? If it was a physical asset or something you could actually see and touch, it'd be a lot easier to rationalize the investment and to feel like you were getting value for money. But it's not easy in security, and it's really the absence of issues that is the true measure. But I mean, my experience is if you do get this stuff right, then you have fewer issues. You therefore build more trust, you build more confidence. You are actually lowering your costs of operation. You're more efficient. Data is not being moved around in an inefficient way. So in a service industry, people don't seem to value time, really. I don't know, anecdote, boring anecdote. I used to work many years ago for a school furniture manufacturing business in Leeds, and we made school furniture, and one order came through and it got built like 300 desks and 200 chairs and all that kind of stuff, and it went through the factory and it got built at secondary school height, which is like 600 mils, let's say, and it should have been built at primary school height, which was like 120 millimeters shorter. So the whole shipment had to go back through the factory to get 150 millimeters taken off all the legs of all the tables to make it fit for purpose. Now, whilst that was going on, the factory, the production planners had been planning the next lot of production. So all the steel and wood to make the furniture was down nowhere to go because the factory was built up reworking this order. So that all sat in the yard outside, and it deteriorated. All the steel went rusty and all the chipboard split. So you got a massive problem and a huge cost because of rework. But in a service industry, we don't attach a cost to rework if it's a human that we're paying anyway to do the job. Who's having to rework to it because it's an inefficient process or it's been done wrong. And again, that's something that struck with me, having worked in manufacturing, that reworking stuff and inefficiency of process is a cost, but often it's hidden. If you can get this stuff right, you're reducing rework. If you're having people rekeying data, there's more instance for error, and it's actually an expensive process.
It's definitely there we go. Definitely sounds like one of those places where people don't know how good they have it until something goes badly. I want to see if there's anybody has any questions as well for Philip. If you do, you can throw them into the Q&A. It's the little question mark icon, question mark speech bubble icon up there at, I believe, the top of your screen. And if not, I will continue to ask questions. I know we have about 10-ish minutes left. So if anybody has any questions, any things you'd like to know more about data security or
points to raise, you might disagree with things I've said, or things to add, quite happy either way.
There you go. There we go. The screens are going wild. Let's see if we get any. People are shy, and then until like a minute before we're about to finish, everybody will throw questions in. But I'll ask another one then while we're sort of sitting around here. What in terms of sort of if somebody is looking to educate themselves or to just kind of get more information, you've lit a spark. Can here, where could they go besides obviously the data protection people's website to find more information about data security and kind of what they need to know?
There's quite a few good sources. I think the NCSE is quite good. You know, they have some good information. And again, I'm not, forgive me, I'm not familiar with the institutions and frameworks in Ireland, but in a lot of this stuff is internationally transferable. So in the UK, we've got the National Cybersecurity Centre, NCSC. They provide some quite good materials, you know, some good frameworks. There's some good websites in America. You've got to try and sift out those that you've got useful tools, useful guidance from those that are trying to sell you something. But you know, I tend to, my bag is mainly, to be perfectly honest, privacy management. So you know, I've got a set of newsletters I receive every day from you know, law blogs, and I have some from the PCI DSS, you know, relating to the payment card industry. NCSC is a good place to go and have a look for stuff. The Information Commissioner isn't that good on security, but they are on, you know, other stuff. Sometimes the European Data Protection Board have got some really good you know, publications that you know, good guidance notes, not only about data protection but also about security as well. They've got some quite interesting publications. But I think probably my go-to place would be the NCSC to start with, and then I would be Googling a subject and seeing, you know, what came up, you know, and then I do read an awful lot of stuff, and sometimes you know, I'm looking at ISO 27001 and ISO 27002 and 3, and the, you know, the different elements of that. I get some good materials or thoughts. Sometimes I'm just looking for you know, instructive thinking rather than answers to questions.
So we have one question in our Q&A here, and
that's
then
an interesting question.
How often should an organization be audited in terms of security?
Well, I think everyone would probably have a different view here, but I mean, you need to between some degree of compliance checking, let's call it, rather than auditing every day, you know. And if you're taking payment cards, you know, you've got an obligation of the PCI DSS to check the chip and pin machines every day. And if you've got those self-service tills, you might check them 3 times a day because there's more chance of people, you know, putting a skimming device on it. You should be checking logs every day. So that's all compliance checking. But actually having an audit as to whether or not your controls are working is probably an annual thing. But we're trying to move to a rolling program. So rather than doing a big, you know, 10-day audit once a year, try and do a couple of days here and there every month or 2 on different topical areas. So it keeps it front of mind rather than it being a big problem to, in some cases, backfill paperwork once a year. But you know, an annual audit, you know, proper audit of, let's show me evidence that your controls mechanisms are working. You know, that's what you want, I think, at least once a year. But on a different level, compliance checking, you know, on a more frequent basis, and hopefully integrated with your awareness training as well. Your training program built into, you know, what we're going to be auditing or compliance checking next, and what we found when we compliance checked and audited, you know, last month. But it's easy for me to say my rose tinted glasses. It needs resourcing. You know, someone's got to be out there doing that, either an internal auditor or an external auditor. But if you were working towards a standard like ISO 27001, you would need an annual audit anyway. You know, you do 2. There's a cycle of 3 audits. You could do internal audit, and then on the 3rd year, a certification audit, which has to be done by an external body from memory. But any less than that, I think, is too infrequent.
I think that, again, in this idea of bringing IPS, bringing everything together, having that tracking built in, having that. You know, one of the aspects of IPS is that it pulls in everything that happens within the system as it happens, so you have that kind of record constantly. We have another question that's popped up too, and this will probably be our last one. I know I said that the last time, but now I mean it. How to keep employees interested in keeping compliance all the time they may not feel like, or they may feel like it's not their job.
Yeah, it's a cultural thing, isn't it? That, you know, I believe it's everyone's job. My view is we've got to try and build a culture that everyone accepts that they've got a role to play. You know, they're not necessarily IT manager, but you know, they have a role to play, even if it's making sure they don't leave their laptop in their car. And if everyone feels like we're all in the same boat and we're all accepting some degree of responsibility for it, then it's a bit easier than, you know, trying to pick people off individually. So to me, it's a cultural thing. It's about, you know, building an organizational expectation that, you know, the way we do things around here is we're all in it together. We're not fighting each other. We're fighting the bad guys that are all out there, you know, and therefore we've all got a, you know, siege mentality type of attitude. And I think lots of, you know, awareness raising, it doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be extensive. This is about, you know, picking on, you know, stuff. One of the strap lines that I picked up at a housing client in Scarborough, actually, they had posters all around the buildings saying, when your bum's off your seat, Control Alt Delete. And I thought, that's a great strap line, is that? So, you know, but posters and things become wallpaper. You need to keep changing the message, don't you? So focus on the things you want people to do and the changes, and also give them the good news, give them the feedback, give them the, if you were giving them the, you know, this is working, you know, with your help, this is working, you know, we're reducing the number of incidents, we're reducing the number of reported breaches, we're reducing the number of phishing emails that got clicked on, then if they know that it's working, I think they're more likely to carry on, you know, doing it and accepting that they have a role to play. I might be wrong, again, I am well known for my rose tinted glasses.
No, I do think that's a good way to kind of bring everybody in, you know, to make it about this is our team goal. This is, you know, how we're going to, this is one way that we're going to help more people.
Yeah, you need departmental heads in. So, you know, departmental heads probably have weekly meetings with their teams, you know, if not daily stand-up meetings. But how often is information security or data protection compliance on the agenda? But it could be. But we got to feed them with the stuff. It's got to be relevant to them. And, you know, if we, you know, in the team meeting, mention how great this was, you know, that somebody did this and it was fantastic, you know, we've got to filter it down, haven't we? It's not my job as a data protection officer. It's everyone's job. And my job is to try and lead them and, you know, under the direction of the top management. But everyone's got a role to play, in my view.
Perfect. There it goes. Kind of on that note then, and it feels a bit, we're inspired now to go out and do our part in data protection. I'm going to wrap us up. I want to say huge thank you to Philip for joining us. Philip, if people want to learn more about you, about your work, where can they find you?
They can find me. I have to say I am on LinkedIn, but I'm a rubbish LinkedIn user. So by all means, look me up on LinkedIn. But if you message me, I might not respond for months, literally, because I'm really poor at that kind of stuff. But if you did want to find out more about what we do, even just have a chat, you know, you can see we like talking about this type of stuff. So if people just want to have a talk about stuff, then go to our website, www.dataprotectionpeople.com. And, you know, we like trying to help. Our mission is to make data protection easy. And our mantra is, you know, benchmark, maintain and improve. You know, so benchmark where you are, maintain that and improve it. So but our website we've just rebuilt. So again, there's a few holes in it, but that's where we are.
Yep. Wonderful. And then along those same lines, if you would like to know more about Bynaric and IPS and all of the ways that IPS's social housing management platform helps make data management much easier, how it makes it part of, again, just sort of part of that culture around providing social housing, and then falls into data security. There we go, words anymore. You can learn more about us at bynaric.com or on LinkedIn. And we want to huge thank you again to Philip for joining us, and for everyone for taking your lunch hour today on I hope where you are more sunny Friday afternoon than it is here in Dublin, where it's been raining for probably the past month. So thank you everyone for joining us and for contributing your questions. And we hope to see you all back again next month for our next webinar. I believe it's about finding where to purchase the most efficient house using data analysis. So it should be a fun, interesting meeting again. And thank you, everyone. And we hope to see you back again soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Caitlin. Goodbye.